So diving into what success looks like and what you're doing now, that's eliminating food waste. So for people who might not be very familiar with Shelf Engine, could you briefly give us the overview on how you're seeking to do that?
Definitely. Yeah. So Shelf Engine is like a really unique value proposition. And I want to tell you like a little bit more about why. Just like, let me start with like the business, like what our kind of our business model is. So like simply put, Shelf Engine helps grocery stores manage their inventory better to boost sales and reduce food waste. And how we do it is really, really unique. So we're not your typical enterprise SaaS company. What we refer to ourselves as an outcome as a service company, or you could kind of see it as like a SaaS company, right? Like, so we create the software. It uses like machine learning algorithms, AI, a lot of like really intelligent forecasting, but we actually don't hand off our product to anyone. So we use like these deep learning technologies to forecast demand on perishable products like deli sandwiches, bagged salads, cut fruits, stuff like that. And unlike other demand planning solutions here, we automate the entire process. So we pay the vendor for all the products they deliver, but we only charge the retailer what it sells. And so that's kind of this guaranteed sale model that we have, where not only are we guaranteeing profits for our customers, we're better predicting the food that the vendor is going to have to create, right? So they're not creating too much food knowing they're going to waste food. We can help the retailer better estimate how much to put out on their shelves. It's really like a win-win for everybody, right? And so does that mostly answer your question?
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, because from what you're saying, what I hear is, for example, let's say there's Whole Foods, which is the retailer. There's Shelf Engine, and then there's the vendor who, let's say, is supplying tomatoes. So rather than Whole Foods buying tomatoes directly from the vendor, Shelf Engine goes to the vendor and says, we know exactly how many tomatoes to get so that it's perfectly stocked. And we'll pay for it out of our own money. And then we'll go to Whole Foods. And the way that Shelf Engine makes their profit is they'll take a little markup over the price they got it from the vendor. So if they got tomatoes for $1, they might sell it, let's say, for like $1.20. And so they'll take that profit. But for Whole Foods, the benefit is that we didn't have to take any risk. We're only paying for what gets sold. And we know for a fact, based off the data, this much is going to get sold. And if you're the vendor, you're not spending extra time and effort for no reason. You're making the exact amount of tomatoes that you know will get sold. So it's a win-win-win in that regard. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, you're understanding it perfectly. I think what's like particularly interesting about this is that we like in getting the data from the vendors and from the retailers, like you're absolutely right. Like we know, or we have a very good prediction based on data of how much they're going to sell, right? And so they're guaranteed to make a profit. The vendor's going to get paid, right? And Shelf Engine says, hey, we think we're so good at this, and we think that like we are going to give you, like we are going to sell the right amount, that we will incur the cost if we're wrong, right? And part of that markup, I just want to point out, is not actually hitting the customer. And it's not hitting the end consumer either, right? So in reality, when we look at the data of our customers, we see that they have very, very high waste, right? So they're already losing tens of percentages of profits to waste, right? And
I heard the CEO say that 1/3 of the food at most grocery stores goes to waste.
That's correct. Yeah. And so, and then a lot of products, they only make about 1 to 3% margin on the individual product, right? And so there's really this like, 30% gap that even if we do mark up the price, they're still making more money by working with Shelf Engine.
Yeah. Whoa. So the actual product, is it the AI? Is it the ability to predict, or is there a physical element? Is there a hardware element? Just as a layperson, I'm curious.
Yeah. So it's all software based right now. We have our engineering team builds a web application and a mobile application. The mobile application is used by our team that we call Shelf Champions, and they go into stores and they do a lot of things like inventorying, taking photos of the shelves, providing us insights from customers on satisfaction and like, what can we be doing better? Oh, maybe this item stocks out a lot and like our forecaster is not picking it up, right? And so we have that mobile app aspect of it. That web app is really like, I think, what carries a lot of the product that we build. I mentioned that our business model is like outcome as a service, right? And so that is fueled by these machine learning algorithms and the models that our data science team builds. And the engineers build the tools that our non-technical teams can utilize to like, so they'll utilize our web app. they'll work with like what we call our forecaster, which is what the models and the AI and the machine learning actually power. And then they'll use that to actually build the orders. So we do forecasting and ordering for our customers, and as well as a variety of other things. But all of that is really handled in-house. And so, yeah, so to your point, it is still a software service, but we don't actually hand that off to anyone.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so for example, going back to this Whole Foods example, Whole Foods, let's say, is working with Shelf Engine and says, all right, we're going to have you handle all of our tomato inventory. And you say, great. They can, whenever they want, look at their iPad and say, okay, we have this many tomatoes coming in this month. And you know, that's how they know what inventory they have coming in and out. And they don't have to deal with it. They just know they have the right amount of tomatoes coming in every month.
Yep. And then they can give us the feedback through our shelf champion base or through the relationships that we've built with them to say, hey, I think the forecaster is not predicting enough. So a good example of this is we have a couple of stores that we work with in Wisconsin, and a lot of grocery habits are fueled by very much external factors, weather, major events, COVID, huge factor.
Right.
In Wisconsin, it's Packers games, right? So,
oh, interesting. Okay.
So grocery stores want to see more chips and guac. They want to see more fruit platters, right? Rather than just like cut fruit or bulk produce, because that's what people are buying. And so unless we really invest in that data science aspect of it and like building in some of these exogenous factors, we won't pick up on that, right? And so to your point about Whole Foods being like, hey, I know I'm going to get this. Like, yeah, we know we're going to get this, but part of building that mobile app is to get that feedback as well, so we can make our forecaster better and better.
That's so fascinating. So for example, in the case of those Wisconsin stores, your algorithm will then account for the Packers schedule and budget accordingly.
Another fascinating one I saw is that if a snowstorm is going to happen in the Midwest, where I'm from, I'm going to stock up on food before it happens because I know it's happening and I've been through 100 snowstorms and I know exactly what to expect. But if an ice storm wipes out the entire power grid in Texas, nobody thinks that's going to happen. So there were no increased shopping habits beforehand. There were no increased shopping habits during because people can get around. And then there was a ton of wasted product, right? And so there's things like that where there's like these natural disasters or major events that are also regional that we need to think about, because consumer habits in different areas of the country or in different areas of the world are so drastically different, even if they're for the same retailer that we work with.
Does that mean you're now thinking of factors like, for example, the Texas example, you do now have to account for the fact that, hey, this part of the country is on their own power grid and we can't show the same kind of budgeting we do for places that are used to handling storms. So the next time a crazy storm comes to Texas, unless they've made significant changes to their power grid, we're going to have to, you know, account for the fact that things might go haywire. Is that kind of the new calculus?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's exactly that, but you're absolutely thinking in the right way, right? So it's making sure that we take into account all of the things that could impact a forecast. And that is going to change over time because people change over time, right? And the world changes over time. And so being able to build models that are super robust, able to take in new information, we can build features for our tech teammates or our non-tech teammates to be able to work with to handle these like really random scenarios. That's definitely something we're thinking about.
So at this point, is it completely working with the retailer and the vendor, or is there a component of engaging consumers directly?
So currently our really big focus area is in reducing food waste in grocery stores, right? And so we work directly with the retailer, but I think that being kind of at the center of that supply chain, so it goes like, you know, farmer, distributor, vendor, or I should say vendor, distributor, grocery store, consumer, we kind of sit in the middle. So we pick up habits on both sides, right? So we learn if crops get frozen because then our vendors aren't able to supply certain things to the grocery stores. We know if there's a Packer event on the other side, we know that like that's going to impact consumer habits, right? And so I think in particular, grocery stores are interesting because a lot of the food waste happens there, but there's definitely food waste at many points in the supply chain. I think grocery stores make the most sense to be at right now, though.
I'm wondering how this could expand eventually to restaurants, because that seems like the next frontier of food waste is how to take it down in restaurants.
Yeah. And I would say like what's interesting, like particularly being at this company now, is like we're just in such a different world than we were even a year ago, right? Especially when it comes to restaurants. And so I'm interested to see kind of what happens as restaurants begin to open across the country, as people are getting vaccinated, as like new rules are created and other rules are lifted, and how that impacts grocery stores and like, or not grocery stores, but restaurants and restaurant buying habits. Cause I'm sure it's like, even that's going to be different than it was a year ago.
Yeah. And I mean, to this whole pre-COVID versus post-COVID idea, has that affected your approach at all in terms of your creative process, or have you found the approach you were taking toward product before and now is generally the same? I mean, you're accounting for new factors, but has the framework evolved in any way?
Yeah. So I can't talk about it specifically to Shelf Engine because I didn't join until about 9 months ago, which was, deep into the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I would say that it's definitely like, as things have opened and closed, as we've kind of seen over the past couple of months, it's been really interesting to me to understand how grocery stores react, especially, as well as like vendors and just, access to their facilities. And like in some states, like in Seattle at one point, grocery stores were at 25% capacity. And how does that affect our forecasting, and how our forecasting is impacted by the products that we build, right? And so I think data science is really good at taking in some of those external factors. I think for me on the product side, like having started in COVID, I've always kind of had that mentality of like, okay, well, how is this going to change post-COVID? Or are we going to need to either like hire more people to handle X, Y, or Z, or are we going to need to think about our products in a different way? I don't know yet for post-COVID, but it's definitely something that I think about constantly.
Yeah, well, we'll have to have you back on for the post-COVID edition. This has been super insightful. I've learned a lot, like just even the idea that Packers games are something that grocery stores have to really think about when it comes to chips and guac. That is both funny, but also very insightful in a cool way. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So on that note, we'll wind down with a few little rapid fire questions. Firstly, what's an app that you can't live without? And let's say not something that came with your phone, like messages or camera.
Yeah, because I would have gone with FaceTime on that example. But
Yeah.
I would say pre-COVID, Hopper, the best flight booking app. I think their UI is so sexy. They do such a good job of like really diversifying the flights I can go on, the mixes of airlines I can go on. And like, I'm a big traveler. Like, as you said in my bio, I would get on a flight tomorrow if I could to, I don't know, someplace I've never been. So for me, Hopper pre-COVID. During COVID, Libby, which is like a library book app. You can connect as many library cards as you want. I think there's probably a max, but I have 2, and I can get books at any time and it goes straight to my Kindle, and it's just like so easy to use. And if there's no book at one library, I can get a book from a different library. It's fantastic.
That's cool. I haven't heard of that. That's awesome. Who would you like to play you in a movie about your life?
Gal Gadot. She's so cool.
Yeah.
And Wonder Woman's like one of my favorite movies ever.
Awesome. If you could wake up tomorrow having gained one skill or ability, what would it be?
I'm biased because I worked at Boeing, but I want to fly just on my own. Like, that would be so cool. I know. It's such a cop-out answer, but I feel like I have some background. I have some skin in the game.
And where's a place you haven't been to yet that you hope to visit one day?
I really want to go to Peru. I had a trip planned to Machu Picchu and then COVID hit. So that is like the first place I want to go to when I can fly again.
Nice. And lastly, we like to ask our guests for a song recommendation. We have a playlist now of all our guest song recommendations, which is really cool. So if there's one song you'd like to contribute to the HDYD Jam Spotify playlist, what would it be?
Oh God. Okay. I think my go-to song in any situation is Jubal by Klingandi.
Okay.
I'll write that down for you. But
okay, yeah, please do. Amazing. And where can people check out your work and keep up with you on social media?
Yeah, so you can check out Shelf Engine by going to shelfengine.com. We're actually going through a website revamp soon, so there's going to be tons more information, lots of video testimonials, just like a lot of really cool info about food waste. So go there. And then if you want to follow me, it's at BrillDog on every social media platform you can think of: Twitter, Instagram, Spotify. It's there.
Awesome. And if you're curious about the podcast, you can check us out on Instagram at HDYDpod. Steph, thank you so much. This was super cool. Product people are always fun, but you especially, it's always good to see you. So thank you.
It's great to see you as well. Thank you.
Of course.